On this episode, we learn about All Walks DC, a local pedestrian advocacy organization. Then we meet a pedestrian who had a close call with a distracted driver. We attend a day of action for safety demonstration. We look at a poorly placed pedestrian button on the route to a military hospital. We learn about Wheelmap, a crowdsourced app for wheelchair accessibility. Finally, is it safer to walk with traffic or against traffic? Stay tuned.
We're in Washington, D.C., talking with Kelly Dillon, who's on the board of All Walks DC. What is All Walks DC?
All Walks DC is a semi-new pedestrian advocacy organization, and we're a 501c3, and we started about 2 years ago advocating for pedestrian safety and general walkability issues here in the district.
What got the organization started?
Well, there'd been general interest among folks in Ward 4 on creating a pedestrian advocacy group, but the catalyst for us really getting started was I was hit by a car in front of my house about a year and a half ago, or two and a half years ago, really, in October 2013. And it was a drunk driver situation, and I was loading my car, and I was standing between two parked cars, and this car came out of nowhere and struck the car behind me and sandwiched my leg between the two parked cars. So I sustained some pretty serious injuries, and when I was still in the hospital, friends got together and petitioned the Department of Transportation for some safety improvements on Arkansas Avenue where I was struck. And it was a successful campaign, and we thought, this is something that everyone in the district should have the resources to do. And we started out small, trying to get people involved on issues in their neighborhood, and it grew into a citywide effort to get legislation and enforcement measures passed to make the city safer for everyone.
What are some of the key things you're working on to improve pedestrian safety?
Our big campaign areas have been trying to get infrastructure improvements in high priority zones. So looking at what are the most dangerous intersections in the city for pedestrians? What are the most vulnerable groups that seem to be, victimized by dangerous driving or bad engineering of streets? And how do we get those improvements made? But when we started approaching those issues, we realized that there really wasn't a lot of open data available to the public to tell us where those dangerous intersections might be. And so our first big campaign was really trying to get the government to release crash data on not just pedestrian crashes or fatalities, but really any traffic crashes that involve cars, bikes, pedestrians, anyone in the city. And with that information, we can make better calls on where we should focus our efforts, but the government and the Department of Transportation can also use that information to make better engineering planning.
Is that sort of data covered under the Freedom of Information laws, or what do you have to do to get the government to let go of it?
Right, so it is covered under the Freedom of Information Act, but that data, by the time you put in that FOIA request, is old. So we can get data from 2013, but here we are in 2015 without timely data, and the city has changed so much in the last 5 years that it's important to have that data. And it's important for the government to be transparent in releasing it so that we can all work together to make improvements.
And a few days ago, the mayor announced a new Vision Zero plan for the city. How does that fit into what you're trying to do?
Vision Zero is what, that's the ultimate goal, right? That's perfection. So we believe that all injuries and fatalities from traffic-related incidents are preventable, and there's no reason that those should ever happen. And so we're thrilled that the mayor and the city have committed to that goal, and that they've released this very detailed plan, which we're looking forward to seeing put into action. Open data has been a big part of that plan, and we think that's the most important step going forward to making sure that we're all safer in DC.
And does what you're working on go beyond safety, that people want a comfortable and pleasant place to walk, and beyond just making it safe?
Absolutely. DC is one of the leading cities in the United States for walkability. I think over 50% of people commute to work either on bike, walking, or taking transit every day. And so, whether you like it or not, we're all a pedestrian at some point. And it's important to making this city better, more livable for everyone, to have pedestrian safety measures put in place. And so when, we know that when people are walking and they can do their errands in their own neighborhood without having to get into a car, it's good for the economy, it's good for the community. And we want to see DC become that city that we know that it can be. It can be a walkable, safe place for everyone to live and enjoy.
One of the decisions you made early on was you're going to be an organization to work with the District of Columbia and not with the greater region. What was behind that decision that you weren't going to try to cover such a huge area?
Well, I think for us, starting out, we're an all-volunteer organization, and we are all residents of DC and had some positive interactions with DC government and contacts here. And, I think that, at least in the beginning, is the most reasonable, manageable goal. But DC is part of a network of, a large metropolitan area. And the people who are walking and working and driving and biking in DC are from Maryland, they're from Virginia, they're also from DC. And so to tackle the problem, it's going to be a regional effort. And I think in the future, we'd love to work with Maryland and Virginia and their walkability as well. But for now, All Walks DC is focused on what we can do here in DC and with the DC government.
What's the real key to increasing pedestrian safety? Is there one thing that has to be done, or what's going to make the difference?
Well, I think it's a complex problem. And part of the issue is this city is really engineered in terms of street design and enforcement and traffic patterns to move cars as efficiently as possible from A to B. And that's understandable, right? Congestion makes people go crazy, and we do have a congestion problem in the city. But the reality is, to make it safer and to make it more walkable, it can't just be about drivers. It has to be about complete streets and making sure that everyone, our most vulnerable residents and folks who are driving big cars, have a safe way to get from A to B. And we believe that, enforcement is part of that, but engineering is really the key. Streets are dangerous by design. If you have a wide street, that encourages people to drive faster. If you have blind spots, that encourages crashes to happen. And so the whole idea behind Vision Zero is that we have to look at that problem from all angles and make smart decisions to help people follow the laws and to help people drive safely. It's not just about, writing tickets or making sure people cross in crosswalks. It's about looking at this globally and making sure that we're designing a system that's going to be successful.
Vision Zero, that's a pretty ambitious project. I'm sure it's going to use up a lot of time, but is there anything else you're working on at the moment besides the broader goal of Vision Zero?
I think right now, taking the success of Vision Zero is the first step, and making sure that the project is funded, making sure that people are on board and implementing the recommended changes. And I think ultimately the bigger issue is a cultural shift. We need to get out of the mindset that, it's all about driving and it's all about me. What it's really about is making sure that we're looking out for each other and designing our city to meet everyone's needs. And I think that's a shift that's going to be a little bit slower than simply passing a law. So for us, we're thrilled that Vision Zero has been passed, but we want to be vigilant and make sure that we're implementing the changes that have been recommended.
We're talking with Dan Berkman. What's been your experience lately with traffic safety?
I'm a big long-distance runner and live in Washington, D.C., and often run in the Rock Creek Park, which is a trail system, but I have to run on the roads as well. And a week ago, I was running back and crossing Connecticut Avenue, which north of DuPont Circle, which is a pretty busy intersection on a Tuesday, Wednesday morning around 8, so pretty rush hour time. Found myself at an intersection waiting for a red light to turn green. That light turned green and the walk sign was going for a second or two, and took a couple steps into the intersection when I heard "watch out," and I jumped back, and a car sped by me, probably going 35, 40 miles an hour, and narrowly missed me. I should say I was running with headphones in, but I only run with one headphone in for safety reasons to make sure of my surroundings, so I'm glad I was doing that to hear the watch out. And sure enough, when I jumped back, and there were other pedestrians about to step into the intersection with me, and they took a step back as well. But that car ended up going through the intersection, through the red light, and hitting another car, and that person ended up having to go to the hospital, the one that was driving through the red light, as she got hit in the side of the car on the driver's side. I'm an emergency manager, so my instinct was to call 911, and the ambulance came 5-10 minutes later and took her away on a stretcher. And she was conscious, but also not verbally communicative, so don't know the reason for why she made it went through the red light. It was well after the light had changed, but having taken a picture of the car later and looking at it a little more in depth after the incident, it appeared that she had a book in the dashboard, so I don't know if she had been reading at the time or distracted for other reasons. But as a runner in DC, I'm very cognizant of intersections, why I cross, or looking both ways. And I think, running, biking, the law of probability is you're gonna have a close encounter at some point if the current laws are as they are, and it's good to be aware as a pedestrian or a runner or a biker, but also it's important on the driver's side too.
So you have someone who is possibly reading a book. We have people texting,
Right.
people on cell phones, people doing everything except paying attention to driving. Is this a cultural problem we're going to have to tackle?
Oh, I definitely think so. It's as technology with cell phones, and our attention span is shorter from what it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. People at red lights take out their phone, check email, not always paying attention to the road. I think that as we get more comfortable with the technology and driving with the technology, it's only increasing the likelihood that these types of events will and can occur.
We're in Bethesda, Maryland, talking with County Council Member Roger Berliner. What's been going on this morning?
What's been going on is we've lost two beloved members of our community to crashes on state roads recently, a bicyclist on Massachusetts Avenue and a lovely 95-year-old woman crossing right here at River Road. And we said enough is enough. We need to call attention to all of these sets of issues, the engineering, the education, the awareness. We need to do more. And we called for a day of action, taking to the streets. Something many of us did many years ago. This is a different form of taking to the streets, of just trying to bring our state highway people in to say, can you help us? Can you be a partner in making our state roads safer for pedestrians and bicyclists?
And then, in addition to the community members, you're holding up signs. Who else was here?
Well, we really had almost every member of our community here. We had our director of the Department of Transportation, we had our chairman of our planning board, we had our state senator, our state delegate, we had the chairman of our public safety committee. So we had community members, we had our county officials, we had state officials. We brought everybody together to say, can't we do better?
Why is it important to bring all these different groups of people in on an issue like this?
Well, our state bureaucracy actually moves pretty slowly, so that unless you come up with a very dramatic way of bringing attention to something, often it just dies in the bowels of the bureaucracy. So what we were trying to do is create a context in which we could jumpstart this conversation, in which we could say, partner with us, do what other communities are doing on simple things like crosswalks. In other communities, when a pedestrian enters a crosswalk, it literally lights up so the drivers see there's somebody in a crosswalk. So Maryland doesn't do that. We think it's time for Maryland to do that. So it's calling attention to issues like that, where they can make engineering changes that will make it safer for our pedestrians.
Massachusetts Avenue, River Road, they're both state roads. How much control does the county have in a situation like this, and how much are you dependent on the State Highway Administration?
Well, we're totally dependent on the State Highway Administration for engineering, for crosswalks, for signs. Anything that affects the traffic on a state road is a State Highway Administration responsibility, and we have no control over it. That's why it was important to have our state delegation here. But enforcement on speed limits is something that our county can do. Enforcement on distracted driving. And so recently our police were dressed as homeless people, and they had a little sign saying, "I am not homeless, I am checking to see whether you are on your cell phone." I think there were 30 citations in a matter of hours. Our cell phones are both a blessing and a curse. It is so easy to be consumed with texting and emails, even as we drive. 80% of fatalities now are a result of distracted driving. So we have a serious education campaign to do. We have a serious enforcement campaign to do. And we have serious engineering to do.
And you're in the county council. What can the county council do, or what has the county council been doing?
Well, the county council's been doing, and I've been working closely with Councilmember Mark Elridge, who chairs our Public Safety Committee. I chair our Transportation Committee. I serve on the Pedestrian and Traffic Safety Advisory Committee. And so what we've done is added resources for education, added resources for enforcement. Those are the areas that we can do something about, and those are areas we did something about.
What's the follow-up going to look like on this? A month from now, 2 months from now, what has to happen to make sure this just doesn't fade away and nothing happens?
Well, we're going to keep our communication with the state going. I am cautiously optimistic that the state will come through for us, but we're not going to leave it to crossing our fingers. We're going to keep working it. And I know that our police and I know our Department of Transportation are committed to the education component and to the enforcement component.
We're on Rockville Pike in Bethesda, Maryland. On the west side of the pike, you have the medical center station for the Metro Rail system. And on the east side, you have the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, the world's largest military medical center. Supposing you're a veteran that got off the subway here and you'll want to use the crosswalk to get to the medical center. You have to push a button to actuate the pedestrian signal. What's in front of the button? A large sea of dirt, and in wet weather, a large sea of mud. It's a relatively simple concept that you have the pedestrian button next to a sidewalk, next to a paved surface. Don't our veterans deserve better? Don't all pedestrians deserve better? We're in Vienna talking with Raoul Krauthausen. What is Wheelmap?
Wheelmap is an online platform. You can find it on wheelmap.org. And it's a map for wheelchair accessible places. So everyone can rate in their neighborhoods worldwide if their neighborhood is accessible, like shops, cafes, restaurants, or cinemas. And you can download an app for your smartphone. We are on Android, iOS, and in a few weeks on Windows Mobile. And so everyone worldwide can rate if a place is accessible for wheelchair users or not.
How did it get started?
We just had the idea, and we started with a PowerPoint presentation, to be honest. And with this presentation, we won a prize in Germany, and it was worth $10,000. And these $10,000 we took and gave it to a software developer who built the first version of Wheelmap in a web browser, for a web browser. And with this version, we won another prize. And so we could start working on a mobile app. And from there, it just started to grow. And now we are funded by donations and sponsors.
What makes a place accessible, and what sort of obstacles are there that would make a place inaccessible?
When we use Wheelmap and when we talk about accessibility, we have a very low approach on accessibility. So for a wheelchair user, the biggest problems are steps and stairs. And if a place has a step in the entrance, which is too high, you can't enter it. So you don't need to bother if there is a wheelchair accessible toilet inside, because if you can't come inside, there's no need for it. And so we started to rate if there's a step or not. And now we have a lot of places rated, and now we are working on the rating if there's a toilet. That's the second biggest question.
So how many different countries are people using this app in now?
Well, technologically, the app works worldwide, and we are now running in 23 languages, and all crowdsourced by our users. So we ask them which language you can contribute, and so we are now online in Japanese, in Spanish, English, French, Portuguese, Turkish, Klingon, and so on, a lot of languages. And of course, we are based in Germany. Most of the usage is in Germany. But we also have some big activity in Japan, which is very interesting. And some of them in other countries in Europe. But for example, in the United States, there's the activity very low, because the law in the United States is very strong. So a lot of places are already accessible, and but they have to do it by law, so there's no need for an app like Wheelmap.
What's the legal situation like in Europe? What's required there?
Well, Europe is not that grown together like United States, so every country has its own regulations, and each country in itself has its own countries with its own regulations. So it's very hard to build a law like the ADA in the United States. In Berlin, for example, where I live, they really try to force owners of buildings and shops and cafes to become accessible, but especially in older buildings, it's very hard. They only can enforce the law in new buildings, and that's a big problem in Germany.
How's the public infrastructure, the streets, the transit systems, where you'd think the government would have a little more ability to do things if it chose to?
I would say, compared to the United States, the big cities in Germany have a very good public transport system, like buses, metro, and other kind of services, and most of them are accessible now. So that might be better than in the United States, but if you can't enter a place if it's which is not accessible, so why be on the way? It's very important that the whole chain is accessible, and not only the public transport system, or not only my home, but also the goal I will be.
What do you see as the future of Wheelmap?
What we are working on is right now, there are a lot of similar projects worldwide, like Wheelmap, but the Wheelmap is the biggest platform because we are open data, we are crowdsourced. So it's very, and it's the oldest maybe. And what we want to do is we want to work together with all these other similar initiatives worldwide to make the biggest database together in the world, to approach companies like all these producers of navigation systems to use our information and to add them into their systems. But we want to make a movement, and we don't want to make the biggest product. We want to make a movement. We want to become the idea, a hero and not a product.
What do you do when you're walking along a road that doesn't have a sidewalk? Well, the first thing to do is complain to your local government that they need to put in some sidewalks. But until they can, the general wisdom is walk on the left side facing traffic. In some states, that's actually the law. But is that the safest place to walk? It depends. On the road behind me, there's a pretty good shoulder on the one side and nothing on the other side. Vegetation right up to the pavement, you'll be walking in the lane of traffic. So that's the first consideration. Do you have a shoulder, either a paved shoulder or a grassy shoulder, or do you have vegetation, ditches, slopes that keep you from stepping out of the way of cars? Are there parked cars? Is it an advantage or a disadvantage to walk on the side of the street with the parked cars? Are there intersections and driveways? Every place where you have an intersection, you have to worry about cars turning right on red. They're looking to the left, they're not looking to the right to see you, the pedestrian, walking against traffic. Similarly, left-turning cars coming from behind you are going to go across your path, and they're also looking for approaching traffic and maybe not paying attention to pedestrians. There are a lot of considerations that go into which is the safest side to be walking on. You need to analyze the situation and you use your own best judgment and get the government to put in sidewalks.
Visit us on the internet at www.pedestrians.org.